2016, 2017 era, you were right around 40,000 unique appraiser licenses that were submitted.
Difficulties, complexities, change that is coming to our space. A lot of that is what makes people nervous about whether appraisers are going to be needed or around. Appraisal volumes are the lowest they've been since 1995. There are a ton of appraisers and not enough appraisals to go around. And we have this wave of PAREA students that are nearing licensure and going to hit the appraiser populations and be competing with us. How should we feel about that as appraisers? Is there room for these folks as a PAREA student? Should they be concerned that there is a livelihood in earnings on the other side? Jeff and I think so, and we will be talking about all of the different nuances that make up this debate. Look forward to debating it.
Well, Mark, it's great to be back with you again. We've had a fun interview with Sean recently. We've talked a little bit about what PAREA is, why it's here. You know, in some conversations that we have been having, and even looking at some data, I've realized that the flow of new appraisers coming into the market through this, now that PAREA is here and in the market, it's probably going to be slower, and it's probably going to take longer than what even I had been anticipating as we've thought about it. Now that it's here, it's kind of exciting in the sense of we've got this unproven thing that's now out in the market. But what's that actual impact going to be as far as do we have a wave of new appraisers coming into the profession immediately? I think we've got some data we can look at that will give some context around that. Maybe some market realities that in this conversation I hadn't fully appreciated as to what is the impact. Is there an avalanche or a slow trickle of PAREA appraisers hitting the market in the near term? So excited to have you with us and look forward to diving into this topic.
Yeah, I'm excited to share thoughts on this topic. Every appraiser, I've been doing this for nearly 25 years, Jeff. I think you've been at it for a long time. And the number of appraisers, every additional license out there is competition for us. It's how we're conditioned to think one way or another. And so it's always on my mind. And I think it was the What is PAREA episode, we were talking about more than 5% of current licenses in prospective students have showed interest in PAREA. So you see that it's popular, right? There has not been a way to get into the industry before. There now is something more accessible, although still admittedly under development. But that's a lot of people, right? So could we withstand 5 or 10% more appraisers right now when volumes are historically low? The answer is probably no, but what we're finding out is that PAREA is complex. It's not easy to get through, and those 6-7% of folks that have expressed interest are a long ways away from graduating and entering the profession.
You bet. And not only are they a long ways away, but we're very far in this moment from having the 6 to 7% that have expressed interest, even in the program or ready to enter if they wanted to. We've got, I think, limitations on how many can even get in and be going through the process, right now.
Jeff, what I have seen is, and this is what naturally happens in these down times, through no fault of the appraiser who is required to be the mentor and be willing to bring people into the industry. I have seen lenders on the mortgage side revert back to not allowing trainees to participate in the process, despite during the COVID years, as there was a shortage of appraisers for a while, historically high mortgage and refinance applications coming through, of course, but trainees were allowed to participate in the process and by growing numbers, and that has really reverted back. I've even heard folks from several of the different GSEs speak and kind of encourage that right now, that if you got a choice and you don't need to let a trainee operate and things are slower, then go ahead and go that way. So it gets harder again, for folks to enter the industry one way or another.
Yeah, I think you're touching on what's probably a theme of this episode, is that there are cycles in the market. There are cycles. The pendulum swung from not allowing trainees to be very involved to there was a lot of volume. There was more volume than appraisers to do it, so there were more flexibilities. And now that volume swung back the other way for appraisers, it's kind of a natural market cycle that I've seen shift back and forth. Whether it's trainees or other leniencies or more strict guidelines, in lending and appraisal practice. The market cycles, and right now, it would seem that we're at a really bad spot of opening the floodgates to a whole bunch of appraisers right now when existing appraisers don't have enough work. So I mean, I certainly understand the concern there. I don't think that there is a floodgate of new entrants coming in to the appraisal profession. The 5 or 6% that you referenced that have expressed interest are not now in the wings, ready to, get their credential and be appraising this year. And I think they're far from it, and it will be a fraction of those that have expressed interest that actually get certified and are doing appraisals, in the near term.
There has been downward trending on the number of appraisers, licenses, at least those that submit appraisal reports to the GSEs over the last decade. So that is certainly happening. And we'll talk a little bit later in the episode about other pressures that I think are on the appraiser population around the country, and might continue to drop our total census. This, even with mortgage applications increasing, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, whatever that is from this moment in time. So, Jeff, we had thought it'd be a good time here to share a couple of data points and slides that we've collected, just 3 of them actually, but kind of running through. Do you want to run us through this Appraisal Foundation slide?
You bet. I don't think there's a ton of time here, but it just struck me as we were talking about this. It was a good reminder as to how long PAREA has actually been, from conception phase through now. It's actually, we have a provider offering it in the market. My poor memory was suggesting that it was maybe 2016, but from the slides that the foundation put out, it was actually 2015 was when this idea of PAREA was first, kind of conceived and starting to be explored, and and that sort of a thing. It's evolved from 2015 through an exposure draft, that was then put out in 2019, started gathering subject matter experts in 2020, second exposure draft in, later in 2020. And then, adoption has been approved by the foundation by October of 2020, at which point it started going out to the states to get the individual approval at the state level, which has been ongoing since 2020 to the present. But it was, I think, a good reminder for me that, we're sitting here today in 2024. PAREA was first conceived and started to be, maybe explored, on a preliminary basis back in 2015. That's 9 years, from where we sit today. And certainly there's been a lot of change in the market cycles that have taken place, during the meantime there.
And it's a complicated pathway to add, alternate pathway to gaining this experience. And the stakeholders all are working like heck to implement this and execute as fast as they can, because there is a lot of folks that would like to get in. But the reality is it's complicated and it's new. And anything that is new needs a lot of iteration. We've seen, and we'll talk a little more deeply about this in further episodes, but we've seen at least a couple of the potential providers of PAREA that were, at least from my perspective, closest to the finish line, pull out and not be able to get there because of learnings or understandings of the complication of getting this and putting it out. With the Appraisal Institute being the one that's out there right now. And I know they are always thinking about iteration and learning from these first experiences one way or another.
You bet. And also, one of the limiting factors I know, and having talked to some that were at other education providers that started down the path of PAREA and have since pulled out, as you mentioned, cost was a very significant thing. We've seen some negative feedback about the cost of the AI offering, but the reality is other providers weren't able to bear the initial development cost to even bring it to market in the first place. And so, cost has been a significant factor, for getting through to, see this to the finish line for sure.
Boy, I'm not sure this is controversial in any way, but Jeff, just watching these hearings, watching folks opine on the effort of PAREA to benefit the industry, seeing a lot of negativity opine regarding the cost of PAREA. And to me, this is a potentially or near six-figure annuity for a career, 20, 30 years for folks getting in. And, for $4,000, I mean, I think about it as a trade or college education, whatever prepares you for a career that has a pretty reliable income. I think it is underpriced, quite frankly. I think it's worth far more than what is being charged. But that's just one man's opinion.
There's definitely been, I've seen a lot of those same comments that you're talking about, Mark. And I think maybe on a future episode, we can explore. I've been surprised to learn of the assistance that's available to help defray some of those costs, for those that are able or willing to apply for scholarships. There are a number of organizations that are trying to help make it more accessible to, for those that may, really struggle to be able to bear that cost. But I like your perspective when you step back and say, hey, this is a career that's going to have a good income earning potential over the life of my career. The upfront training cost is not out of line with what I see others, bearing to get into, different trades, professions, whatever it may be.
I can't remember the companies. I wish I could right now, but student loan companies with sort of disruptive concepts and alternate risk analysis coming in looking at the field of study that a student is entering into and their likelihood of earning meaningful income to pay back the student loans and adjusting risk or making loan decisions based on that. If I apply that line of thinking to a PAREA student becoming an appraiser, my goodness, I would be full steam ahead as a lender because I know what is on the other side of someone that has an appraisal license in most years. Certainly not been the last 18 months from at least my experience, but generally speaking, you have the experience and the knowledge, and you hang a tile up, especially in the mortgage industry. Boy, work comes calling.
Absolutely. And even when we're sitting today in this situation where most appraisers that I know that are doing any mortgage origination type of appraisal work are struggling. Things have been really slow. They shifted pretty quickly from very busy in COVID years to massive increase in mortgage rates, massive decrease in number of appraisals being requested. And so I don't mean to be certainly not insensitive to those that are legitimately struggling with volume in today's environment. You're pulling up the screen here, and it's been interesting to see that, of those that have unique appraisal licenses that are submitting work to the GSEs, to Fannie Mae, to Freddie Mac, in the 2016, 2017 era, you were right around 40,000 unique appraiser licenses that were submitted. If you were to kind of run a trend line, by the time even in in the COVID busyness, you still were in the high 30,000 license level. But with this drop off, you've seen a pretty big drop off in unique appraiser licenses that are submitting work to the GSEs from about end of 2022 through today. And so we're seeing this shift where because the market has cycled, things have really slowed down. But it was interesting to think, or it's interesting to look at this information as far as number of unique appraiser licenses, maybe overlaid against the context of when PAREA was first conceived. They first started talking about PAREA in 2015, as we just mentioned. And from that time in 2016 to the present, we've seen a noteworthy drop off in number of appraisers that are submitting work regularly to Fannie and Freddie.
Yeah, boy, Jeff, I'm seeing, near 40,000 down to about 32, which would represent a 20% drop in number of licenses submitting appraisals to UCDP. And so it is meaningful. And I think that the context with which all appraisers are thinking now and PAREA students are entering PAREA right now is a historically difficult moment in time where interest rates have been increase by enormous levels, at an increase rate not ever seen before. And, it has mortgage applications and purchase index here is shown not this bad since 1995. And I was looking at this data in looking at the change in population of citizens in the U.S. has gone from, I forget the numbers, 314 million to 342 million, something like that. And so you're all the way back to when populations were materially less. And it's just an obviously awful time in the moment to be trying to appraise, to try and find work, to put food on the table and whatnot. Just extremely difficult right now. And we have PAREA students that are studying and entering and devoting time, spending money to get into the business. Is that a good idea right now, one way or another? And I think my answer is generally yes. I think that's a good idea. Now is a good time to be investing because this historically and unpredictably awful moment that we've been in for 18 plus months should end maybe by the end of 2024, sometime in 2025. And we should have a pretty rosy horizon for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And of course, you and I are not, seers into the future. We kind of wish we were. We would have done things differently in the past. But it's such interesting perspective that we're sitting today at a rate of, loan originations that is like a 30-year low, even with a population that's increased, meaningfully over that amount of time. I don't know how long we'll be at these current levels, but it's certainly going to see things pick up. And as they do, we're going to need appraisers that are able to do that work. I mean, as a self-interested appraiser, I want appraisers to have a role, far into the future. And I think that Fannie and Freddie are building, for that reality as well. But you got to have appraisers flowing into the system, to match maybe doesn't have to match the rate that they're flowing out as there are market cycles in the short term, but in the long term, you got to have enough appraisers to match the demand. And in the very busy COVID years, the GSEs were worried about, hey, we don't have enough appraisers. It's taking weeks and weeks to get an appraisal turned around, and that's the bottleneck on getting a loan closed. We have to have enough well-qualified appraisers to be able to meet and match the demand, of the volume that will come back. And it's always hard when you're in a low environment to be, foreseeing or thinking about, man, it's going to be busy again someday. I wish it was today, and it's not. But we're going to have to replace ourselves at some level, or extinction is not the path that I want to go down necessarily.
Yeah, Jeff, so there are downward pressures. So, we hear all the time, if you've been in and around appraisal, that the average age of the appraiser is 62, 63, whatever that is. Doesn't ever seem to move from that, but it feels like as people age, that should move, but it doesn't. But it is about that, which means that half the folks are older than that. And there are difficulties, complexities, change that is coming to our space. A lot of that is what makes people nervous about whether appraisers are going to be needed or around in the next decade. But I think appraisal bias is making a lot. The impact on the appraiser professional is fear and concern that their license is on the line with every report that they deliver in a spot that is very difficult to defend with what's been happening. And so if folks are close to retiring, that is a very real threat and risk that is running out there. You've got the new appraisal forms that are coming out at the end of 2025 and kind of in earnest, I think, in 2026. And that is a huge change for appraisers, that if I am 1 foot into retirement saying, why don't I get out before I've got to deal with all of this change? So there's just a lot of pressure there. And then on top of this concern that I think is real and has been present since I started this in the early 2000s, that the residential appraiser is going away. And my goodness, the amount of business that I would have turned away by giving in to that concern and getting out of the space and moving to something different back then. So, the GSEs have spoken clearly. we could take the position that they might not be truthful or don't really know in earnest what the future will look like, where they're going, but they certainly say that appraisers are part of their long-term plans.
You bet. I think that's a good point that you make. I don't have any reason to believe otherwise. They've invested a lot in, UAD 2.0 or whatever you're going to call it, which is the uniform appraisal data set. I think that there is the role for the appraisers. And PAREA, I don't think is going to change the landscape overnight. In fact, as you start to think about, okay, so how many appraisers now are going to be getting certified and coming into the market, in this time when appraisers are pretty hungry, pretty, desperate for work in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's just interesting that right now PAREA is in the market, but AI PAREA right now has just the licensed residential module that's available. So that means that you can have licensed appraisers starting to come out of that. There haven't been any yet, to my knowledge, unless you have any breaking news for us. Okay, well, I'll overcome that disappointment and move on. Just kidding. But, so PAREA is in the market, but PAREA appraisers are not yet in the market. My understanding is that there may be a handful, or there are some that are getting close to being ready to graduate, but haven't yet. And once they do, to be able to move on to get certified residential, they're going to have to enter that module, which has been approved, but is not available to sign up and start taking yet, as far as I know. What perspective do you have on on availability of LR versus CR modules?
I think the Appraisal Institute will have it available certainly by the end of the year, and hopefully before that. But it is not ready now, and I'm aware of about a handful of folks that are nearing the end of the licensed residential module. These will be the first graduates, so that's exciting. I think that again, availability towards the end of the year.
And what's your best guess as to how long it's taken those that are nearing the completion of the licensed residential module, how long they've been in it? Is it a 6 months, give or take, or more or less than that, you think?
Yeah, I think 6 months is probably a pretty good expectation. I think these folks may be a little bit longer. Maybe the first were in October. I could be wrong with that, but so it's maybe taking a little bit longer now, but these are the first going through a brand new program. So I would expect the pace to pick up as everybody learns.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I guess my point, or just line of thinking here, is best case is 6 months to get through the license phase. Going to have to wait before they can even start and take the residential phase, or I'm sorry, the certified residential module. And we've got a handful of people. Do you know roughly how many are in it? 100 plus maybe, or something like that currently, advancing at different levels, I would guess.
Yeah, about 140 people are in it right now, advancing at very different levels, and an equal amount that would like to get in there, I think, and certainly more through the foundation and others that have expressed interest, in the thousands. But that's a long cry from actually taking the steps to get in.
You bet. No, that makes sense. And I think as we were talking, this was one of the interesting insights to me, is that, we're just starting to get a few ready to be licensed. They can't yet quite get into the certified residential module. They could start working on their own. They could find somebody to work with, to gain experience. And the pathway to get certified residential doesn't have to be, through the PAREA program. But for those that are going to get all the way through certified residential and enter the work force as a certified appraiser, they're still at least 12 months out from being able to do that. And if we take the 140 that are currently in the program at the various levels that they are, all of them are at least 12 months from being there. So in 12 months, we may have, if all went according to plan, 140 that would enter the profession through this model. When we're looking at, I think, 32,000, active appraisers, submitting to Fannie and Freddie, at least their appraisals are being submitted there. It's just not moving the needle that much. And the timeline on which they're even going to enter the market is still down the road, and whether our projections of, hey, the market's not going to be as bad in 12 months as it is today, prove to be prophetic or idiotic, we'll see one way or the other. But the number coming in don't move the needle in terms of the total appraiser population as much as even just kind of anecdotally I was assuming that it might.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, survive till 25, Jeff. That's the mantra for us all. And I think Acurity has our business has we fielded well over 1,000 folks over our years that are trying to get into the business. Certainly, we're unable to hire all of them or even a small percentage. And there is a buildup of folks that don't have a pathway to get in, but have wanted to for quite some time. And so I think there's going to be an early push as a accessible pathway to get into the business exists. That certainly seems plausible to me, but I think it is going to smooth out as we get through those folks, that initial burst, and it will become fairly regular. And ultimately, I think the market forces will dictate how many folks get in and go through the sort of sacrificial learning and education and cost and all of those sorts of things to get into business. In time, you have enough folks to go through and don't have happy careers because they can't find the work initially. That will, that news will pass down to others, and it'll slow. And then when times are great, like COVID, you'll see a tremendous bump. And in fact, the data we looked at from Fannie, we see bumps of appraisers that are sort of a little too late, like new people getting in the business, but they saw how busy folks were for a long time and then spent the 6 to 12 to 18 months it took to get into business.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've seen some of those that kind of got in late. And it's one of the things that's hard, just in terms of a market force is, to become a real estate agent, you can do that on a much shorter time frame. So the population of real estate agents can adjust, faster to market forces. It just takes longer to become an appraiser. And so even when the market's good, there's demand, this looks like a great career, it takes, over a year to go through the whole process of getting certified. And for most, it takes actually quite a bit longer than that, even though the minimum, might allow for something, close to that time frame. But it's just the ability to become an appraiser it makes it harder to adapt when the market's good. So then you get a bunch of people that come in as the market started to slow. And I see that weeding out that you're talking about of, well, it might have looked good when I started, it doesn't today. And so many will move on to, to different things that just out of economic necessity.
Well, Jeff, as we close out this discussion, my message, maybe as a hopelessly optimistic current appraiser, is welcome to all of the current students and prospective students in PAREA. We need, just like any profession, we need good folks entering in on a fairly constant basis. And I think making sure that the appraiser population is sufficient to manage the load that is out here in rural areas, in urban areas, in suburban areas. All of these, we need folks, and we need to be capable of handling this volume when it rises significantly. It does not help our profession when we are falling short of bulge volumes.
It makes a lot of sense, for sure. It'll be interesting to see, what the future holds. Maybe for those that get out of the appraisal profession and go into a political one, they can hire Mark as their campaign manager. He's got your slogan, survive till 25. I don't know how optimistic that feels, Mark, because 25 is not as close as I would like for it to be if that's what the promised land is. But we'll get there one way or the other, I think.
Very good, Jeff. Well, enjoyed the discussion. Look forward to getting an update on PAREA here soon in our next episode, and we'll be back.
Like it or not. Sounds good. Thanks, Mark.